So let's just jump right into things here. I do want to talk about a newer bill that you've kind of helped jump in on, and that's got to do with sort of telemedicine and rural internet, sort of those kind of things. I guess what's all involved with that?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that we've had in this pandemic is we've found challenges in our broadband coverage and in telehealth, and expanding that and making sure that our providers get paid appropriately for a telehealth visit. All that's critical, and I've enjoyed working on that issue because I think it will have lasting improvements for Arkansas way beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely here. And what is this bill, if it does anything, to actually address the connectivity? Because I know that's been a big-time thing here, and obviously with a lot of things moving in this general direction, and obviously health would be right there at the top of things. Is this bill doing anything to address the actual connectivity of rural Arkansas?
Yes, this bill does provide help in rural connectivity, and we've also worked with the governor's office to try to provide additional funding through the Pandemic CARES Act for additional money to leverage in the state for those homes that don't have access to broadband. This is going to take a major effort to get done, but the lasting benefits will be telehealth improvements and education improvements.
Obviously, moving forward here, we're kind of in a day and age where police reform is at the top of a lot of people's list on things that they want to see done. Where are we at in the House, at least, when it comes out? I know President Trump signed the executive order. A lot of people say it didn't really have enough teeth in that bill, but is there anything coming up, or is there anything that's been revised in that Republican bill for police reform?
Right. Well, certainly President Trump's executive order was good. It banned chokeholds, which is a very controversial practice across the country. It increased data collection on bad cops across the country. Those are things that there's a lot of consensus around. In the House bill and in the Senate bill, both led by Tim Scott in the Senate and Pete Stauber from Minnesota in the House, there's a lot of consensus, Jay, on how to improve policing in data collection, banning bad practices, improving grants for body cameras. And that's what I think we need to do more than anything else, is have bipartisan consensus on a bill. So you'll see the House has worked on it this week. The Senate will continue to work on it, and hopefully we'll end up with a bill that President Trump can sign into law that will lead to better policing practices and support our men and women in blue while improving that very important factor of equal justice under law.
And I know, too, and especially here in Arkansas, some of these smaller, you get to small-town, rural areas of the state, even the county, law enforcement agencies, and a lot of these things, and some of them even brought up, it's just a lot of times it comes down to expenses. And
right.
When your applicant pool is what it is at times, sometimes just for rates of pay, admittedly, some of them even said, sometimes you have to lower the bar just to have those warm bodies. So is there anything in that bill that addresses funding, even though I know defunding the police is sort of a thing right now?
Well, defunding the police is just obviously a slogan, but what's in the bill is additional grants for police equipment and police support. If we get back to the area where we can also support police salary improvements, I think that would be good too. But the bill does have funding for grants to fund our police forces. And look, the important is that HR departments, in big departments and small departments, they don't want to hire a bad cop that's got a problem on their record. And this bill and the President Trump executive order deal with that issue so that we can have a better police force out there and honor the 800,000 men and women that get up every day and put on that uniform to protect us.
Would you be in favor of adding to the bill, and maybe it's in the bill, but clarify, to upping penalties for officers? I know that's something that's kind of starting to take off just a little bit, but since they are law enforcement, obviously there's a higher standard there. So should there be more severe penalties if found guilty of, any crimes or some of the brutality that we've seen?
Well, I think one of the most controversial issues is how do we modify qualified immunity? If you work for a public agency, if you're a public employee anywhere in the government, not just a police officer or a fireman, you have qualified immunity from prosecution if you're doing your job correctly, not if you create a crime, but if you're following procedure. This has been abused across the country, and so there's a real desire to fine-tune qualified immunity. Speaker Pelosi wants to do away with it completely. I believe that's unfair to policemen, firemen, EMS workers across the country. I think we should fine-tune it And that's work that we want to do in the House and the Senate.
Bringing it a little closer to home here, the Arkansas Natural and Cultural Resources funding a project on UCA's campus here to the tune of over $634,000. Bigelow Rosenwald, kind of tell us a little bit about that and some of your involvement in that.
Sure. The Bigelow community right on the Arkansas River between Perryville and Conway has one of the last remaining Rosenwald schools. These were a series of thousands of schools built during the Depression in the 1920s to benefit African-American kids who didn't have access to a great education. And Julius Rosenwald was a philanthropist from Chicago. So one of these last remaining buildings is there. That money is going to preserve it. UCA will use it for education purposes, and it'll be a community center right there in the Bigelow community for all those families that have treasured that part of their history.
Let's take it back to the Hill now. The Congressional Oversight Committee, first time they've met at least face-to-face for some time here. What's the update on that? And they are overseeing quite a bit of money trying to get out there. What do we got going on in the Oversight Commission?
Well, the Oversight Commission was appointed by leaders in the House and Senate. I represent the House Republicans. Donna Shalala from Miami, Florida. President Clinton's former Human Services Secretary represents the Democrats in the House. We're overseeing the Fed and the Treasury to make sure they do a good job in helping get the economy restarted, keep people employed, and it's really an important task. We met with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and Fed Chairman Jay Powell this week to talk about how their work is proceeding and the concerns we have that it's not moving fast enough to benefit the economy. It was a good meeting, but there's a lot of work to do.